Hello, welcome to Disconnected. Um, this might be a little slightly longer video. Essentially, this is all about this whole legislation that they're trying to push through, which is really going to hamstring our ability to protest. But it highlights more than that because on the one side, we are talking about a government that is clamping down really heavily on the ability of people to protest because of quite draconian stipulations, as well as kind of grey areas which can then be interpreted by legislators, by the courts, and by the police. Which I always find is a big issue. If you look at a lot of laws nowadays, you'll notice that they're so grey that they can be kind of swung in the prosecutor's favor if needs be. The other point here is that I personally am 100% against having an unelected bunch of folk in government who can then, have influence on the law, just like the influence of royalty in the UK. So the House of Lords, for anybody outside of the UK doesn't know, is basically a bunch of dudes who come from old money, who come from old landowners, who have a legacy seat in the House of Lords. And the House of Lords is like a second house in our Parliament, which scrutinizes bills that come from Parliament. Nobody in the House of Lords is elected by the public or by any kind of democratic means. These are legacy seats, and also So I've tried to figure this out, but apparently Parliament doesn't need the House of Lords approval for something, but pretty much everything goes through the House of Lords. And they can kind of point it back and make amendments to bills. And they can sway stuff quite heavily because of their influence and their reach and and their power and influence. But as far as I know, if Parliament doesn't actually require them to agree for something to go through. However, irrelevant, the House of Lords should not exist, in my opinion. Yet in the last, I would say, 10 years, I've seen a few little times where, if it wasn't for the House of Lords, there would have been much worse laws coming through. And I think this is another case where, even though they shouldn't exist, they might actually be doing some good here. Anyway, so the story is about the peers. So the peers are the lords that deliver several blows to the government anti-protest bill. The House of Lords vote against flagship bill orderable on day when Extinction Rebellion protesters disrupted proceedings in the chamber. Now I know yesterday when they were voting on it, there was another massive kind of protest happening just outside the chambers. The government bill aimed at cracking down on protest has suffered a number of setbacks in the House of Lords, setting the stage for a tense showdown between Parliament two chambers. Peers inflicted a number of defeats on wide-ranging public order bill, which is aimed at curbing guerrilla tactics used by protest groups. The draft legislation first defeat in the Lords came when peers voted by a majority of 22 in favour of higher threshold before police can intervene in protest. So if you look at what they're proposing is pretty much anything that even possibly resembles any kind of public disorder or any sort of point where the public might be, kind of stopped from doing their daily business, the police can immediately jump in. They can also, the bill also proposes that if there is like a planning of doing something like that they can preemptively go in there and stop people and arrest people and stop them from organizing protests. Even if you knew about a protest, to go and see it, there were cases not long ago where journalists were arrested and taken into custody because they found out through social media that the next day there was going to be a protest on a certain motorway. They obviously went there to cover it, and with their press like kit on and everything, they were still taken away. I mean, that's insane. That's completely fucking insane, right? So anyway, so the laws are really, really heavy-handed and absolutely undemocratic, and in my opinion, absolutely borders on full-on dictatorship kind of stuff, silencing people. Obviously, this was all sparked off by the whole Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil, Insulate Britain, those kind of things that are happening at the moment. So, where do we start? First things first. These laws cannot go through. We have a government which is, and we have a trend that is moving towards this locking down of people, putting them into poverty, giving money to the rich, making life at every step harder for everyone, taking away kind of what anybody would see as normal kind of human and civil rights. Thanks to Brexit, the economy is becoming problematic. Being able to trade with anybody outside of the UK is becoming problematic. And this is a real kind of, it's starting to feel like that kind of North Korea type, all right, now we're this little place and we have to use legislation and force to kind of keep everybody in line. And then there's obviously the other part of this whole story, which is because every time the House of Lords is mentioned, you have to ask yourself, why the fuck is the House of Lords mentioned? Why are they in our system? Why do we have an unelected group of people who have either the right or a huge amount of influence over the laws that are made by, dare I say, our elected people? Which I say very vaguely, our elected government. So, however, interestingly enough, it might be the House of Lords which actually, puts a little bit of a brake on our Tory government. Let's see if there's anything more interesting here. So, arguing for a higher bar before the bill's provisions are triggered, Labour peer Vernon Coker said, "We are going to pass legislation here where protests that all of us would regard as reasonable, all of us would regard as acceptable, are going to be illegal." In response, the Home Office Minister Andrew Sharp said, "What we are trying to ascertain is the point to which protesters can disrupt lives of the general public, and the government position is clear: we are on the side of the public." No, they're not, because in this case, you can argue that, okay, Just Stop Oil and all them, they've really caused massive disruption to the public. But when you get these laws through, it also means that when people start protesting against certain things that the government are doing, which in a way is actually what what those are, then they can get away with it, and they can use the public as an excuse. You can't protest against the horrible things we're doing because you might disrupt somebody trying to get to work, right? The government wants to protect the rights of the public to go about their daily lives without let or hindrance. I would suggest that what they're trying to do is the government wants to protect the rights of the government to do what the fuck it likes, bring over draconian laws as much as they want, without let or hindrance, not the public. This is a switch, this is a switch around, a classic wool over their eyes kind of thing. And I hope people see this, because I can understand somebody sitting on a motorway and being stuck there for 5 hours because some dude changed himself to the road, and this person needs to go to I don't know, he wants to go to work, or he needs to go and see a doctor, he's got an appointment, or he's going for a job interview. Completely understand this is a massive, massive problem. But that is what protests all about. It's like, here's a really big issue that we need to highlight. And we need people to pay attention, and we need people to listen. And the further we get with all of our societal problems, a lot of these issues that protesters are coming out about are extremely important for our near and distant future. Regardless of what people think, the truth is we need to deal with very serious issues, and we need to deal with them quickly. And governments and corporations are 100% not going to do it. They are not going to be the guys who are going to solve these problems. It has to come from grassroots. It has to come from the ground up. And if people are not able to voice what needs to be done, that's not going to happen. Now, people can argue, I suppose, that there's other ways of doing it. You can, lobby your local MPs and whatever. We've got an issue in our town, which is a bit of a serious issue that we have with getting our kids to school, blah, 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 blah. And I can tell you, going to your local MPs is absolutely pointless. You've got this one dude that you can go to and speak, who's your local representative in government. They have no power. All they can do is raise issues in Parliament, and that's pretty much that. That's it. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to change anything. You need to get to the head of the snake, and you need to make the changes right there. So, twofold. It is a problem, and we need to get that sorted.